So I want to welcome all of you. Good morning. And I am glad to be with you as we look at Psalm 24. Psalm 24 is different than all the other Psalms we've seen till now. And I continue to be tickled and curious and delighted to see that, at least until now, every Psalm has a different story to tell. This one overlaps with another Psalm that we looked at, which was Psalm 15. You may recall Psalm 15. Adonai, who will sojourn in your tabernacle, who will dwell upon your holy mountain. These two Psalms, Psalm 15 and Psalm 24, are linked by the theme of who is worthy to enter into the temple. Yet they're also very different. What's delightful about Psalm 24 is it seems to be a psalm that was enacted as a call and response, as a ritual at the time of the temple. And so in this context, as we'll see, the way the verses are constructed is that it's as if there's a processional and there's a leader chanting a verse or a half a verse and the crowd answering as they proceed toward the Temple Mount. I'll look to share with you today some of the imaginings of what prompted the writing of this psalm, as well as what kept this psalm alive as an integral part of the people's songster, psalter. But let me first read the psalm so that it's familiar to you. And before I begin to read, it's 10 verses, I'll point out that it's divided into 3 parts. So listen for that when you listen. And also listen as I read it to you for what you would see as the call and response. I'll share with you why I ask that later. But here's how it's broken down. Verses 1 and 2, that's part 1 of the 3 parts, is a declaration that God is creator. And then verses 3 to 6 is this characterization of who will ascend the Mount of Adonai. And that's that description of an ethical person. And then verses 7 and 10 shift to raise up the gates. Your heads be raised up, portals of eternity. And that is a shift as if it's proclaiming a processional with God at the head. And a second question that I will look to clarify is, how are these 3 sections integrated with each other? How are they part of a whole? God is creator, who's an ethical person, and then open the gates for God to enter into the temple. With that as the introduction, let's read the 10 verses, and then I will share these playful imaginings of what prompted the writing of the psalm. I've done so many different translations as I continue to research this psalm. I just want to make sure that I'm reading. See, I found my most recent translation, which is what you should have in front of you. Yes, thank you, Eric, for only Eric knows how many times I tweak a psalm. So here it is, Psalm 24. Who may ascend God's mount? For David, a psalm. For Adonai's is the earth and its fullness, the world and the dwellers within it. For God upon the seas founded it, and upon flowing waters set it firm. Who may ascend the mount of Adonai, and who may stand in the place of God's holiness? The clean of palms and pure of heart, who has not borne in vain my spirit and has not sworn deceitfully, shall bear a blessing from Adonai and bounty from the God of deliverance. This is the generation of seekers of God, yearners for your presence, O Jacob, Selah. Raise up your elevated gates. Let portals of eternity be raised up that the God of glory may enter. Who is the God of glory? The guide of glory. Adonai, strong and mighty. Adonai, mighty in battle. Raise up your elevated gates and let portals of eternity be raised up that the guide of glory may come in. Who is this guide of glory? Adonai of hosts. God is the God of glory, Selah. And as you could see, the verses 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 are repeated, which is to say it's part of a communal chant. Now, let me first share some of these colorful stories and then talk about how these, let me first talk about how these three sections are related. And then I'll tell you the colorful stories when it's a little firmer in mind. So here's story one. It's of the Midrash. It's also in the Talmud, another variation. And that is, what is the moment for the composing of this psalm? Actually, I'm now shifting into talking about the composition. All right, let's do it that way. It's possible this was written by King Solomon. That's the popular classical understanding, that this is part of the inauguration of the temple, the first temple built by King Solomon. And as King Solomon brought the Holy Ark to be placed into the Holy of Holies, there was a problem. Now, there's a problem with the gates. In the Talmud, in Shabbat 30a and Sanhedrin 107b, there's the same, almost identical words of the story, and that is that the gates were closed, not letting Solomon enter. And as Solomon chanted, raise up your elevated gates, because they were closed. Let portals of eternity be raised up that the guide of glory, which is actually the King of glory, may enter. I will talk later why I chose to translate it as guide instead of king. But then the doors said, thinking that Solomon was talking about himself, who is this King of glory? To which Solomon answered, Adonai, strong and mighty. Adonai, mighty in battle. And then he says, raise up your elevated gates, and the gates open. So that's how it is in the Talmud. Interestingly, in Midrash Tehillim, they say that when they created in the first temple the doors of entryway, they hadn't measured how wide the portable tabernacle was, the Holy Ark specifically, and that's what took place, that they couldn't maneuver to get the tabernacle in, so that's why it's raise up, get higher, so that, kind of like an attic, raise up those portals, let it enter, and then a miracle occurred. So theory one among the early rabbis, and they cite Psalm 24, is this was Solomon dedicating the temple and having this back and forth of difficulty of his own challenge to his humility in bringing in the Holy Ark. Now, I'll pause to say there's another link in that the Ark is identified as the place of God's glory. I'm going to pause to add also that this phrase, Melech HaKavod, King of Glory or Guide of Glory, occurs 5 times in this psalm and nowhere else in the Tanakh. There is one other place in Psalms where you get Adonai HaKavod, but nowhere this particular phrase of Melech HaKavod, King of Glory. David Kimchi, who I often cite because he did an extensive commentary to Psalms and is one of those often quoted in Art Scroll, Radak, who lived 1160 to 1235 in France, he sees this moment of the psalm being written as David's transfer of the ark to the city of David. And same idea, David is bringing in the ark, having acknowledged God as creator, the challenge of being a moral people, and the way it's often presented. David wrote this when he transferred the ark, which was in Shiloh, to Jerusalem, having conquered a neutral city. David conquered Jerusalem from the Jebusites, which politically was a smart move because nobody would claim him dominating one tribe or one tribe dominating others. It was a city of the Jebusites. And the story goes that he wrote this in bringing in the ark with the hope that when the temple would one day be dedicated, it would get sung. And last, when was this particular psalm composed? One other theory is it was composed for war. You get early on in Numbers 10:35, how the ark was taken at the front as the people went into battle. We get a little taste of that as we put the ark, Torah, back in the ark, and we say, Shuv Adonai Rufot Alfei Yisrael, return God, the champion of thousands of Israel. The sense of God as a military leader. We have that image, Adonai Ish Mochaman, the song of the sea. God is the God of battle. And that this, in terms of raise up your elevated gates, God and is coming as a way of engaging in a processional on the way to war. So those are three theories as the possibilities of what prompted, but there's a fourth. And the fourth, for me, is that it's a pilgrim's psalm. You have to imagine 2,000, 3,000 years ago, people were living in mud huts or tents, and they would go to the temple. And what they would find when they came as pilgrims is that the Temple Mount was literally on a mountain, Har Zion, Mount Zion, Mount Moriah, and they would climb the 15 steps to get to the top. And there, it was the largest structure that many had ever seen. There was a choir of Levites singing psalms. And this may have been a popular psalm that the people sang with this call and refrain. So I'm going to read it again, and now we're going to talk about the call and refrain dimension. So it begins with verses 1 and 2. For David, a psalm. For Adonai is the earth and its fullness, the world and the dwellers within it. For God upon the seas founded it, and upon flowing waters set it firm. Now that might have been a declaration of God's power as the creator, and that as the creator, everything in the world belongs to God. The ultimate statement, this place of worship is not just a place of worship for us Israelites, for us Judeans. This is the world gathering place for the creator of the world, so that the moment, the anticipation of going up the mountain is elevated to the source of all power, all ownership of the earth. And now the call and refrain. There's two ways it can be understood as a call and refrain. One, and now I'm looking at a text by Nachum Sarna. I once showed this book before of Nachum Sarna analyzing about 10 different psalms. He analyzes 15 and 24 together. And as he sees the back and 4th on this, it's initially the leader saying, "Who may ascend the mount of Adonai, and who shall stand in God's holy place?" And then the people answering, "One of clean palms and purity of spirit, who is not born in vain, my spirit, and has not sworn deceitfully, shall bear a blessing from Adonai and a just reward from the God of deliverance." And then the leader responds, "This is the generation of those who seek after God, the seekers of your face, O Jacob, Selah." So that's one way to see it, as a call and response. I tended, when I read it, to see it broken up in the middle of every sentence, so that the initiator says, "Who may ascend the mount of Adonai?" And the people then in refrain say, "Who shall stand in God's holy place?" To which he, the leader, says, "One of clean palms and purity of heart." And then the people, "Who has not borne in vain my spirit and has not sworn deceitfully." And then the leader says, "Shall bear a blessing from Adonai," and the people amplify, "and a just reward from the God of deliverance." Because part A and B of each verse seem to be, if you will, amplifications, not a new idea as such. And then the leader would say, "This is the generation of those who seek after God." And the people respond, "The seekers of your face, O Jacob, Selah." Either way, and again, I smile to appreciate even here the unknown of how this was sung. But what was clear is this was a pilgrim moment, and there was this call and response. And here too, it can be a back and forth. "Raise up your gates, your heads, and the people would, and be raised up portals of eternity." And then the people would say, "That the God of glory may come in." And the prayer leader would say, "Who is this King of glory?" And the people would respond, "Adonai, strong and mighty, Adonai, mighty in battle." And the prayer leader, "Raise up your gates, your heads, and be raised up, doors of eternity." And the people would respond, "The God of glory may come in." And then all together, "Who is this guide of glory? Adonai of troops. God is the guide of glory." So I pause again to see in Psalm 24 something we haven't experienced yet, which is a psalm as a communal ritual, a ritual of back and forth, perhaps sung, as psalms often are, put to music. And you can feel the anticipation of going up the mountain, the excitement of pilgrimage. Some comments on choice of words. Verse 4 is often translated "one of clean hands and purity of heart." Let me also focus on verse 4. There are 4 ingredients here, 2 negative, 2 positive, that defines a person worthy of going up the mountain. So one of clean hands, meaning they haven't stolen, they haven't taken what wasn't there. Literally, the word kapayim is palms. And I like palms because you can hide things in your palms, like a magician. But it can be either palms or hands. And purity of heart, that's your intention has always been good. You've acted right, you have intended right. And then the next 2, which are the negative, "Who has not borne in vain my spirit," which means hasn't taken God's name in vain, "nor has sworn deceitfully." Both of those are commandments of the 10 commandments. Has not perjured oneself, has taken a false oath. So verse 4 again describes a good person. It's not the highest standard necessarily. It doesn't relate to any ritual obedience. It focuses on a loyalty of goodness. And this is how the 3 sections are linked. God is the creator. That's verses 1 and 2. Verses 3 and 6 describe who is a moral person. And that's to emphasize that what God expects, who is the creator of the world, is ethical behavior. Here is a quote from Nahum Sarna. Psalm 24 does not view religion and morality as two distinct phenomena. Rather, religion is seen as encompassing morality, informing it, defining it, and being meaningless without it. And then he will continue, the desired personal encounter with the divine, says the priest, must be preconditioned by the dictates of morality or is unwelcome. So the link between first section and second section is the emphasis that the God of the Bible, the God of Psalms, is both the creator of all, but a creator for whose concern is morality of all. And that leads to the third section, and that is, let us honor that God. And here there's and therefore raise up your elevated gates. It's like open the doors. And here, again, the question is, who is being spoken to? Is it the gates, literally, or just metaphorically? And I tend to see it, again, in that midrash with Solomon. He's saying, gates open up, and the gates saying, who's asking? Who is this King of glory? So a word about my translation of guide of glory. Literally, the word melech has as its root leholech, to go. The king is the one who leads the way. And a madrich is also another way of saying derech, the one who is of the way, similar to melech, another word for way. And so for my contemporary ear, I chose, rather than speaking of God as king, which doesn't always resonate in a modern world, as guide of glory, which I believe would be a legitimate translation also of the word melech, just like madrich and derech. So melech and halacha. So who is this guide of glory? We then praise God and have God before us as we go up the mountain. Last is the question, what are the gates, these elevated gates, referring to? Some see it directly as the gates of the temple, that's the context, but others point to it as the future, the world to come. Because we have this image that God has a temple above to match the temple below, that God exists in both spaces, as above, so below, the Talmud teaches, and in the Zohar will be a very important image. And so that the gates we're asking God to open are the eternal gates, the elevated gates, the gates from which God's ultimate throne exists to hear us, to welcome us, and for some commentators, pointing to the future of a world to come where we who are good will be privileged to enter into God's heavenly abode. So to pull this together, to give us a few minutes to share some of your reactions to Psalm 24. Psalm 24 is distinctive in that it's a psalm of ritual. I see it as a psalm of the Pilgrim. Nahum Sarna, that great Bible scholar, he imagines that it was a psalm recited on Rosh Hashanah, because that's when we speak of God as king and coming up to the temple, and that's when it would be chanted as a community. But we don't have any place in the Talmud or the Mishnah where that's recorded as a ritual. So it's really speculation, but it became such a popular psalm that I tend to relate to it as something not necessarily on that day alone of Rosh Hashanah, but as pilgrimage. And it's distinctive in that quality of call and response. You can see yourself with throngs going up toward the Temple Mount, preparing yourself and singing in celebration. So with that, a couple reactions. Let's take 5 or even 10 minutes. Does anybody have something that grabbed you in this psalm? Jerry, let me see. Go ahead. I gotta put on a different screen so I can make, so I can see everybody's hands. Go ahead, Jerry. I don't hear you. Gotta unmute. I still can't hear.
Okay, here I am.
Now here, good.
So I love this idea of the creator, the way that you connect the different sections of the psalm, the creator as somebody who expects morality. And it reminds me of, I can't remember who was asked, can you explain the Torah in one sentence while I'm standing on one foot? And what was the answer? You know, treat your neighbor as you would yourself, and that is the ultimate of ethical behavior.
Right.
So that's what the creator wants from us.
So well said, link, Jerry. That's the story of Hillel in the Talmud Shabbat, right, where it's a prospective convert to Judaism who comes to Hillel and says, teach me the Torah while standing on one foot. And the first century rabbi in Israel, Hillel, will respond, don't do to others what you wouldn't want them to do to you. The rest is commentary. Now go and study, which is to say that that's the starting point. It's not the whole story, but it is the essence. And clearly here too, it's only one verse, only verse 4 that describes who's this pilgrim that's eagerly awaited. And it's these 4 qualities in this case, 2 positive, 2 negative, of being a moral person. Other reactions or prompts when you heard this? Got a wave, Vivian?
Well,
I saw Vivian first, and then who was it? Richard, who was also.
That's okay. Yeah.
Okay, so Vivian and then Richard, and then I'll pull this together.
I just can never get. Well, just tell them.
Oh, it was Hal. I'm sorry. It was Hal. Vivian and then.
I mean, so I can see this also as a kind of drama, question and answer, question and response, throwing through the whole of the psalm. Second, amazing how in different translations, I have the King James Version, and they insist on King of Glory, which allows for more of a Christian interpretation of the psalm.
Yeah, right. The King of Glory. Now, again, this image of glory. One other thing just to share with you about this image of glory. You know, you have these uses of glory. So in the Exodus, when they're out beginning their march in the desert, it says in Exodus chapter 16, verse 7, and in the morning they saw the glory, hakavod. The kavod there was the fiery light with the fire within the cloud. But moving forward in Exodus chapter 33, Moses will say to God, show me kavodecha, show me your glory, which seems to be a way of show me your essence. And then God will respond there in chapter 33, verses 18 to 20, I can pass my goodness before you, but you're not able to see my face. Nobody can see my face and live. But what Moses asks for there is show me your glory. So glory is, again, an expression of this fiery presence of God that is also the essence of God. And as I noted, this is the one place in the Bible that God here is called the King of Glory, which also sets up that midrash. You know, the rabbis in the Talmud look for attention. Because it's a unique phrase, they put it into the mouth of Solomon, raise up the elevated gates, let portals of eternity be raised up, that the King of Glory may enter. And then the doors say, who is this King of Glory? Meaning, are you calling yourself the King of Glory? To which he will respond, no, the King of Glory is, Adonai. strong and mighty, which is only again to underscore this is a unique word or name of God, King of glory, or in my case, Guide of glory. Thank you, Harold. One last comment in terms of Hal's. There is that sense, you could see it as a march, you know, we're doing some protesting these days, and there's often a back and forth, a way to get a sense of unity as you move forward with a leader and a chant and a response to create a flow that's very much part of this pilgrimage moment. And that resonates for me. There's a kind of a, I wish I was there feeling in hearing that response. Vivian, did you have your hand up before? You got to unmute yourself.
I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
No, is that right? Does it work now?
Yes.
Yes. I'm just picking up on the previous comment. This particular psalm also is one of the high points resonant in the Handel Messiah that people sing so often, and that I grew up playing it for a high school chorus for. This is the chorus. Lift up the head, O ye gates, and then it goes on, who is the King of glory. And so this psalm, unrecognized perhaps particularly, has had enormous influence and resonance in early modern times in another tradition. And
that's wonderful.
You hear the different calls and responses.
Yeah.
If you listen to that passage, and then everyone joining together so that it becomes an open invitation to sing, for everyone to sing.
That's beautiful. Not one that I caught in my research, and I'm really grateful not only to have the note, but to hear you sing a piece of it, Vivian.
Well, I could sing the whole thing, but I will spare.
But thank you, that adds a lot for me. So let me add in closing that Psalm 24 is also sung as we carry the Torah around the room in returning the Torah to the Ark on a weekday. So it's done every day but Shabbat. And, you know, Su'u Sha'arim Sheichem, same kind of, you know, thing. There's the sense of processional as we're walking the Torah. And it's frankly one of the Psalms I knew the best, because in the Talmud, every Psalm is assigned, but every day is assigned a Psalm. And Psalm 24 is assigned to Sunday because of the creation motif, the Talmud will say. That we, on day one of creation, Sunday, day one, we acknowledge God as beginning creation. And so Psalm 24, I recite once a week in that context. So thank you. Psalm 24, again, I pause to acknowledge how every Psalm has had a different texture, and as you noted, Vivian, a different ripple into our collective religious traditions, often through musical compositions, Psalms which were musical compositions. So here's a little bit of a tease for Psalm 25 tomorrow. When Bill Clinton was asked what were the 5 pieces of scripture that were most helpful to him after the Monica Lewinsky affair, he cited Psalm 25, which people had sent to him. So tomorrow we'll study Psalm 25, and it too has some distinctive features to all the 150 Psalms. He did cite 5 Psalms. I'm going to send out a little notice about Psalm 25, and I'll put in what the others were. It's a Psalm of forgiveness, but that's tomorrow. And again, thank you for sharing Psalm 24, the celebration of processional to temple. Be well.
Rabbi, do we need anybody
Thank
to
you very
say
much,
Kaddish?
Rabbi.
Do we have Kaddish today?
Does anybody want to say Kaddish today? No. Linda, are you on? Linda?
Yes, I would like to.
All right. Let me just say Kaddish with those who would like. And in saying Amen for this prayer, we participate in a mitzvah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yitkadal dash shebei be'alma ra kirutei yamlicha
Israel, Bhagavan, Bisman Karbir, Imru Amin,
Amen.
Rabba, Rahman, Amen, Yitbar, Yitramam, Yitnase, Yitalal, Shmei Kedusha, Rechu, Rima, Yintel, Chata, Shirata, Nechamata, Amiran, Yalma,
Amen.
Shlomo, Rabba, Moshemaya,
Amen.
Aleinu, Yalkal Yisrael, Imru Amin, Shalom B'Mamav, Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Yalkal Yisrael, Imru Amin.
Amen. Have a good day. Thanks to all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye,
Thank you so
everyone.
much, Rabbi.
Be well.